We fixed an early breakfast and started down on John D. Rockefeller Jr. Memorial Parkway. It's a scenic highway that connects Grand Teton National Park with Yellowstone National Park. In summer 1926, Rockefeller Jr. with his family were escorted by Horace Albright, then superintendent of Yellowstone National Park. They were mesmerized by the splendor of the Tetons and yet were appalled by the uglification of Jackson Hole by its unplanned tourism developments. Returning to New York, Rockefeller formed the Snake River Land Company, which he deployed to anonymously acquire several thousands of acres of land in Jackson Hole. He donated this land to the federal government for the creation of the Grand Teton National Park. As we joined the Teton Park Road, we scanned the landscape for wildlife. We spotted an elk grazing in the brush. Elk, or wapiti, is one of the largest species of the deer family. Male elk, called bull, have large antlers which they shed every year. They can weigh up to 750 pounds, or that's over 300 kilograms. In Asia, they are called stags. We then headed towards the Signal Mountain Lodge on Marina Road. At its boat ramp, you'll get to see the best view of the entire Teton Mountain Range. It has a near-perfect northeast location for viewing the Grand Teton. You should reach early in the morning when the sky is clear and the sun shines on the Tetons. I think the lodge would provide spectacular views too. এটা তো একটু গ্লাইড করবে হাওয়াতে, ওরা ব্যাক করবে, ওরা বুঝে গেছে অনেক হয়ে গেছে, বাড়ি যাই। ওরা এখন লার্নার, ট্রেনিং কোর্সে আছে। চারটে একসাথে আছে, একটা একটু লিডার। এই তোরা আগে যা। ও আরো অ্যাম্বিশাস। আবার টার্ন করে বললো, ওই লিডার বললো, এই ভয় পাচ্ছিস কেন, আমি আছি না। ওরা পুরো পাগলা, আমাদের কথা শুনে কিছু একটা ভাবছে। মানুষ কোথার থেকে আসলাম, ভাগ। stopped at a turnout near Spalding Bay at the southern tip of Jackson Lake. It is a close-up and near-perfect northeast location for viewing Grand Teton over the Jenny Lake. On to Moose and joined the US Highway 191 before turning into Schwabacher's Landing Road, which gets its name after someone who was unceremoniously bumped off a boat on its riverbank long ago. The dirt road leads to a trail that weaves through a floodplain ecosystem along the Snake River. We even got to see some cutthroat trout in the wetlands and marshes. The view of Teton Mountains and its reflection in the Snake River is a picture to behold. We stopped off briefly at Glacier Turnout to look at the Teton and the Middle Teton glaciers from right to left. Even further left is the U-shaped Death Canyon, and at its head is the Death Canyon Bench. This horizontal edge is a 4-mile plateau and is likely a lake bed that was pushed all the way up. Beaver hats were fashionable until 1850s. The search for beaver fur brought early trappers from Canada in 1819 into Jackson Hole. The lonely Frenchmen must have imagined the Teton Peaks' resemblance to womanly charms and hence gave the French name for them. By 1890s, the first homesteaders arrived from Idaho, and among them the Mormons, and they established the Grovant community. Mormonism is the only global religion to have been invented in the past 200 years, even though most Mormons consider themselves as Christians. The Mormon Row Historic District consists of buildings, barns, fields, and corrals of the Chambers and Moulton families from the Mormon settlement that lived in that area until 1950s. The alluvial soil made it more suitable than other locations in Jackson Hole for farming, though there was a lack of readily available water. So they built a shared drainage system. This shows how Mormons revere organization and cooperation. They believe that God created the world out of chaos rather than out of nothing. We were hungry, so we headed past the National Elk Refuge to the Creekside Market and Deli in Jackson. They even had huckleberry lemonade. After lunch, we left for the float trip car park in Moose, from where we would get picked and taken to Dead Man's Bar on Snake River for the Scenic float trip. Since we had time to spare, we walked over to the Craig Thomas Visitor and Discovery Center next door. While waiting to watch a short film called Grand Teton National Park Life on the Edge, we browsed through the exhibits area there. We had booked an afternoon Snake River scenic float trip from Barker Ewing. The float trip started 10 miles upstream at Dead Man's Bar and continued through the most scenic stretch of Snake River before ending in Moose after 2 hours. This was the intended classic highlight of our trip in the Grand Teton National Park, and which we had all looked forward to. As promised, our guide Travis treated us with spectacular scenery, thrilling wildlife stories, and a fascinating history. A word of advice here: these trips fill up quickly, so get your online booking done about 2 months in advance. The Teton Range consists of some of the oldest rocks. A 2.7 billion year old metamorphic rock called gneiss makes up much of the Teton Range. Molten magma began squeezing into the cracks within the gneiss 2.5 million years ago to form igneous granite. Its interlocking crystals make it even harder than gneiss, and it forms the highest peaks in the central Teton Range. The Tetons are among the youngest mountain ranges compared to the middle-aged Rockies or the elderly Appalachians. Erosion has therefore had much less time to work on its jagged peaks. The mountains uplift one earthquake at a time along its 40-mile-long Teton Fault. In an earlier glacial advance about 200,000 years ago, large ice sheets flowed off the Yellowstone Plateau through to the Jackson Hole Valley and buried the valley under almost 2,000 feet of ice. Glacial meltwater then carried away the fine sands and silts that would have retained moisture and allowed our topsoil to form. This left behind only gravel and cobbles in its outwash plains. Sagebrush is well adapted to dry soils and now covers these plains, whereas the conifers cover moraines which mark the borders of former glaciers.
yesterday morning when I measured it was like 52. Probably by the end of that, it's around there, 52, maybe 55 at the most.
Good look.
Wow, it's cold.
Afterwards, we drove back into Jackson for dinner. This time, it was at the Teton Tiger. It's a friendly place where you can get decent Asian fare, and I mean Chinese, Korean, Thai, Japanese, and even Indian flavors. Finally, it was the US 191 highway back to Flagg Ranch for the night.